Happy Tuesday, and welcome to a one-day early version of BC Poly Hot Stove Social Distancing Edition. I'm live from Victoria in my own dining room table. I'm Maclean K. I'm the editor-in-chief of The Orca, and I am joined, not live, by...
Yes, from my fold-up table in my wife's office. It is I, Jordan Bateman, Vice President Communications, the Independent Contractors Business Association. I name-dropped my wife because not only was it her 40th birthday yesterday, but she just made a cameo on our first recording, but it was early enough. We just restarted.
So this is our second take.
Right. This is our life now. This is life in the sequester, I guess.
Well, first things first, happy birthday to your wife. We were just talking about this on air. You found a way to make things special, even though you're on lockdown.
Yeah, it takes a lot. It takes a lot more thoughtfulness because you got to really kind of think like, how are we going to entertain? Like, what do you do all the time during the day? Because you can't just run out somewhere. You can't go in anywhere. So you got to make sure everything's ready to go. But we went for a really nice walk at Ambleside in West Vancouver. It was a Monday. It was pretty quiet. Huge open spaces, so you never got within even 12 or 15 feet of anyone else. The highlight, though, was eating takeout in the Park Royal Mall parking lot. You haven't lived until you've celebrated your 40th birthday eating takeout in a mall parking lot. So this is this is where we're at. But lots of nice things and lots of nice things got dropped off. So yeah, it'll be good. It was good. It was good. But we are looking forward to someday traveling again and taking the long anticipated 40th birthday trip.
Well, I have a selfish reason for asking because, of course, my own wife's birthday is tomorrow.
Yes.
We face similar circumstances, so I am furiously cribbing notes.
Yes. For us, her sister had come over the night before and written in chalk in the cul-de-sac, which was pretty funny.
That's cool.
The kids had little notes and stuff, and we did little posters and stuff and decorate the house, and we just tried to make it seem like, look, I have to say this. It was a different kind of day than the 20-something days we've had up to that. And that in itself was probably just a huge gift. Like, it was something different. Like, hey, we're going to celebrate Bud's birthday. That sounds great, right? Like, it was just a break from the routine that we've all kind of had to be forced to settle into.
Well, I mean, speaking of which, I was laughing. My wife and I were laughing our heads off last night, not just chuckling. I said something to the effect of, "Hey, are you excited about the long weekend coming
up?" Yeah, I'm hoping to visit my garage.
I mean, she, like millions of others, her work is shut down. So, I mean, she's off work, and so we were laughing about a 4-day weekend, and we were trying to explain it to Ian. He's 5 years old this morning too. It's like, does that mean I still get to stay home? Yeah.
well, today I was telling you this today. Like, we were really excited because we heard a truck in the cul-de-sac. We peered out the window, and they were flushing water mains. And this was a great 15 minutes of entertainment for us. So there was me, Indy, Danica, Jack, and the dog all staring out the window at these two municipal workers flushing a water main because we're like, oh, something out of the ordinary. Woo! So look forward to their Netflix reality show. Two township workers and a water main.
I do have an actual sort of BC Poly Hot Stove-esque topic I want to talk about. I don't know if you saw this because you were obviously very busy yesterday, but the Canadian Greens issued a tweet. I'm wondering if you know the one I'm talking about.
No.
I don't have it in front of me, but it said something to the effect of, in a really snarky tone, "Good morning to everyone except the corporations putting, northern Indigenous communities and workers at risk by deciding that pipelines are an essential service." Yeah. That's not verbatim, but it's really close to verbatim. I wrote a blog today on theorca.ca, which you should absolutely check out. But here's the Coles Notes version. First of all, it's not accurate. Corporations, whatever you think of them, do not decide what is an essential service and what is not an essential service. That's in here. That's Dr. Bonnie Henry, the provincial health officer, and I think it was either today or tomorrow that they updated some of their guidelines for work camps, which are being followed to the best of my knowledge from here in Victoria. Second of all, was the tone really necessary? I think you can criticize government policy without sounding like an extra from Riverdale. Good morning to everyone except, I mean, come on. Yeah. There's a reason you guys, that party maxes out at about 8%. We've talked about this before. One of my greatest frustrations with modern politics is the tendency for some to campaign for mayor of Twitter rather
Hmm.
than to convince unchangeable minds, which, especially for a party like the Greens, which has never even tasted, 10%, you would think they'd be very alive to that challenge. And
Yes.
finally, it's all just, I mean, it's all just so very disappointing. It's there are politicians on both in government and opposition at all levels across Canada that are either distinguishing themselves or not distinguishing themselves. And every once in a while, you see something like this, and you just think, ah,
Yeah.
really?
Yes. It's a dick comment from a party that is totally out of touch. Today, Jason Kenney said that he fully expects 25% of
Yeah.
resource development workers to be out of work. 25%, which is mind-boggling and represents a family, every single one of those men and women. Um, what to say about the Greens? Listen, in an era where our economy is grinding to a halt, where we are not sure how we're going to pick ourselves up off the mat, we should be thanking the good Lord for any industry that's still running, that's still able to operate safely within the parameters of what's going on. There are fewer than 500 active cases of diagnosed COVID in British Columbia today. 170 of those are in the hospital. That leaves 330 at home. They're
Hmm.
not on work sites. What frustrates me the most about comments like that is that what BC is doing is working. It's working in a way that Ontario's not working, that Quebec isn't working, that New York isn't working, that Italy didn't work, that Wuhan didn't work. Like, it's working. We have flattened the curve. We have
Hmm.
fewer than 2 or 3% more diagnoses a day. Hospital numbers are relatively stable. There's still the death numbers, but they've been largely confined to care homes, um, which is the most vulnerable population. And even the number of these care homes so-called outbreaks are actually just one member, one person. They've been able to control those. Like, it's working. So what Bonnie Henry has suggested as far as construction going on and work camps is working. So
Yeah.
this nonsense that we need to gut these people too because of some mythical thing that has not happened yet, is just completely out of touch. But yeah, what do you expect from the Canadian Greens? This is a party that's been the personal fiefdom of Elizabeth May for a long time, which tells you all you need to know about its intellectual and visionary capacity. It's embarrassing, and
Even
I'm Canadian at this point.
Yeah, even setting all your very accurate and true points about Dr. Bonnie Henry and the guidelines that are working for everything from
Yeah,
grocery to truck driving, even if you set all that aside for a moment and you decide that you're the Canadian Greens and this is the hill you're going to die on for whatever reason, there's a way you can do that. There's
yeah,
a way you can say, good morning. Today we're going to focus on continuing to raise our concerns with health authorities that we think they're making a mistake with X, Y, Z.
sure.
You can disagree, but at the very least,
Yep.
they're saying, we're listening, but we think you're wrong about this particular thing, rather than, as I say, sounding like an extra from Riverdale. It doesn't
Yeah,
work. It doesn't help.
yeah. Yeah, it looks completely out of touch, and those folks should be embarrassed themselves, but they won't be because they're preaching to their little choir, and that's why they never grow, and that's why they'll never form government in this country. Take it right there. That may appear someday on freezing cold takes on Twitter, but I will. I feel fairly certain that they'll never form a reasonable government. That's for sure. Um, the other thing frustrating to me about that is, like, I think about my last few weeks, and the only time where I felt invaded, or as far as social distance went, is the grocery store.
Mm,
And they're trying all sorts of different things. They space you out now, and many of them
yeah.
have those one-way aisles and stuff. But look, like, that is where you're, like, for a construction worker would be far more at risk going to the grocery store than on a work site,
Yeah.
because the work site, they have set rules, or most of them are wearing gloves, often wearing masks, goggles, other things like that outside. Whereas the grocery store they go to after, you just can't help it. You're bumping up
Yeah.
against people, and people 6 feet varies. It's very clear to me that
Yeah.
some people have a very different view of 6 feet than others. So like, it's frustrating because, again, what we're doing is working, and I
Hmm.
know there's this sort of fear on social media about saying that's working because, well, we should talk about the big Rob Shaw debate
Yes.
on releasing numbers.
Yeah.
But there's this fear like, oh, if we say it's working, people will relax and let our guard down. No, we're here to finish the job. Like,
Yeah.
trust me, I'm dying to go out and do stuff, and the kids especially. And although we did, I don't know, we should I say this? So we took the cul-de-sac and we put like a 10-foot chalk lines, so 10-foot gap, and wrote lava inside it. And then his buddy from down the street came down, and they passed a hockey ball back and forth and tried to score in each other's nets, never entering the 10 feet. In fact, never even getting close to the 10-foot gap.
That's
never
awesome.
touching anything, social distancing, all that good stuff. Jack said it was weird, but for me, it was the only hockey I've seen in 3 weeks. And so I was calling it like it was the 7th game of the Stanley Cup Finals, and it was good. But maybe recap for people the Rob Shaw. God bless him, because he's in the right on this, and anyone who disagrees, I think, is wrong. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know if that's but maybe recap the Rob Shaw. More information, please. Tweet storm from last night.
Yeah, I mean, Rob put it all better than I will, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm speaking for Rob, but essentially the point Rob is making is that he thinks we need and deserve more sort of finely detailed information on, who exactly has come down with been diagnosed with COVID-19. Basically, to make a very long point short, wants more detailed information than we're getting. What we've been getting is broken down by health authority, which to the average British Columbian doesn't mean much. And I mean, quite frankly, it doesn't mean much. I mean, what is island health where I live? What does that mean? I mean, that could mean the city, that could be my next door neighbor, or it could mean someone up in Port Hardy. And so the provincial reticence has been twofold. I'm sure it would be a Herculean amount of work for someone who would probably be better off doing something else. I understand that argument. It may not be good enough, but I understand where it's coming from. But also, they don't want to start a panic. How would you react if you found out your next door neighbor had COVID-19, was diagnosed with it? And, it's one thing if you're picturing the suburbs in your head and you're seeing them in their backyard over the fence. Okay, I live in a condo building. If I know that one of my neighbors has COVID, I almost said 17, excuse me. If I knew one of my neighbors was sick and I passed them in the hallway as they're taking down their garbage and they have no choice but to do that, I'm not sure that that's a good thing.
Yeah. I would say you don't want to go down to like actually releasing addresses, but municipal, neighborhood, that makes sense to me. My a friend of mine who actually back in the day was a pastor at a church out here and then moved to Ontario years ago. He's now the mayor of Whitchurch Stouffville. Great guy, Ian Lovett. And I've been, obviously because he's a friend of mine, I know more about Whitchurch Stouffville than I know any other Toronto suburb. And he releases every day an infographic, and it's like, how many people in Whitchurch Stouffville have the virus? 7. How many recovered? 3. How many are in hospital? 1. How many died? 0. And it's like, oh, okay. All their folks seem to like it. They seem to be respecting social distancing. Like it seems to make sense to me. I can see that kind of information. Like Fraser Health, that ranges from New Westminster all the way to Hope.
That's what I mean.
Both sides of the river, right? Like, come on. There's an Indigenous Health Authority. I don't know if they've reported any. That's the entire province. There's a Provincial Correctional Health Authority. Again, the entire province is covered by that. So you have these like massive geographical spaces. And I guess the fear is, Jody tweeted a picture of like, would this change your mind about going outside? And it was all these giant Corona balls in this in this New York apartment building, outside this New York apartment building. It looked ominous and scary. And I was a bit like, yeah, but it's not like that, right? Like that actually, yes, that obviously would stop you from going outside. Although I guess if I could see the big balls and they weren't moving, maybe I could just kind of dodge around them like the punt returner. But like I was like, nah, that's not really how it is, right? Like, I went to that grocery store and the social media side of you is like, oh my God, this is like where I'm at the most at risk, and you're like hyper vigilant. But then the rational side of me is also like, again, 500 people have diagnosed. Now I know there's undiagnosed cases, but we don't really know how many, and maybe that person's going to be diagnosed. Like, but you're kind of doing the math, right? Like, the odds are pretty good I'm going to be okay. And despite all the scrubbing we're doing of Amazon packages and grocery, cereal boxes, there have been very few, if any, cases reported that you've actually gotten it from an Amazon package, right? Like, despite the craziness of social media, that story hasn't really happened. It's like, yes, it's on there, but no one seems to ever get it from that. So it's hard because we want to stamp this out once and for all. But the truth is, Maclean, and this isn't an anti-China rant, but this virus didn't originate here. It got here through travel. And if we stamp it out here, and the only way we're going to prevent it from coming back is by banning travel. And like, I'm not, is that the price we're willing to pay? And those are the more interesting questions I'm sure are rattling around Adrian Dix's brain as he tosses and turns every night.
Well, and I mean, you mentioned banning travel and in the context of China, but I mean, it's boiling out of control just
New
across
York,
the border in
Toronto, yeah,
Seattle
County, yeah,
right. Like it's
yeah.
it's one thing to ban international flights. I'm not suggesting it's easy or good, but it would be easier to restrict travel to and from China, Europe, Australia, wherever than the United States, where we have the longest undefended border. And I'm not suggesting people are running across the border back and forth every day, but that gets hard. And in fact, in terms of trade, that'll be a very awkward situation if, as seems likely, we get things more or less under control in British Columbia, but it's nowhere near under control, or at least to the same degree in Washington State. What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, my gut now is saying we're going to see kind of rolling closures in BC going forward. Like at some point they'll step off the gas just because you have to. Like, mental health issues, other surgery issues. Like you can't rely on this. Down the road, there's going to be a spike in deaths from cancer, for example, because people weren't able to get diagnosed early enough. And, these are the trade-offs that you make when you close, hundreds and hundreds of hospital beds to other kinds of illnesses. So, at some point they're going to have to relax that because public health, will look at it and go, well, we got to do this, we got to do that. And then I think it becomes, like I said, rolling kind of things. Now, the funniest things to me are things like Major League Baseball. What if we took everyone to Arizona and played baseball there? Or I heard this, Elliot Friedman had what if the NHL went to North Dakota and played in an arena there? And you're like, yeah, but they're still together, right? Like they're still importing it with them.
The craziest idea, I don't know if you saw this.
No.
Dana White, the UFC, Ultimate Fighting.
Of course.
They're buying, and I'm not making this up. I wish they're looking into buying a private island.
Oh.
And bringing the fighters there. I mean, of course, it's part of it just seems so natural and obvious, right? Of course, the end game of Ultimate Fighting is lawless fighting in a private island, like in a Bond villain, where it's just
It's too bad. It's too bad it's too rainy on Galliano or on Salt Spring, because that'd be a hell of an industry. No, I thought you were going to give me no, they're going to go on a barge into what uncharted waters, or what do they call it when you're out at sea but you're not covered by any country?
International waters.
International waters. That'd be hilarious. The International Waters Championship.
Or the captain can marry you, and you can fight anyone you want without catching COVID. It's crazy. And actually, the other thing I want to mention, when we were talking about the information, I know I'm backtracking slightly, but it's been interesting contrasting the approach here in some jurisdictions in the States where they're not only releasing, they're breaking down it by cases by ethnicity.
Oh, wow.
I'm not sure how I feel about that. I mean that literally. I'm saying I don't know how I feel about it. There's a part of me that thinks it's healthy and good. And there has, I guess, been some disparity in some jurisdictions, which shouldn't come as any surprise if you watch the United States closely. Yeah. But
I don't love that. No. I don't love that. But look, in every neighborhood, there's rumors someone died in the townhouse complex next door of COVID, and you're like, well, there was a death in Fraser Health, but was that, what are the odds of that one death being that? It's far more likely the guy just keeled over from a heart attack than from COVID. And that is the problem there. So would it actually stamp out? Justin McElroy is the king of stamping those things out on Twitter, where he's like, everyone has that anecdotal friend of a coach of a brother who's suffering from COVID. I don't know. I just think breaking down my municipality would not be necessarily a bad thing, and I don't think anyone's going to feel free of it just because there's been a handful of cases in a particular municipality.
No, I don't think so. I'm imagining, I live in Victoria. I'm imagining that, I don't know, Souk, which is outside Victoria, and actually I know for a fact there is a case in Souk, so it's a bad example, but just hypothetically,
is it a friend of a friend of a coach of a brother?
No, it was reported in the media, so this is public. But if they did find out theoretically that Souk was currently COVID free, are the people there going to start, rushing to embrace in the streets? I don't think so. I really don't. At least not more than some of them probably already are.
Yeah, no, I agree. I've been thinking a lot about Boris Johnson, just to shift gears slightly, the British
Yeah.
Prime Minister who came down with it and now is in hospital, but apparently not on ventilators, but in ICU. If he dies, the sitting Prime Minister of one of the great nations on earth, 60 million people, um, that is going to send a lightning strike, even more so than the Tom Hanks
Yep.
diagnosis did at the very beginning. It'll be similar to the NBA canceling the season, right? Like,
Hmm.
like, whoa, this is massive, this is huge. Like I worry about obviously him just in general because he's a human being and I think a pretty good prime minister who's navigates. Talk about challenges in a term. Like you go from having to get through Brexit to doing to coronavirus. Like, oh my God, like that is a term for history. But I do worry about the emotional, mental, spiritual impact of that. Although, of all the countries on earth, maybe they survive it better simply because they do have the queen as that non-political figurehead who can kind of console the nation and provide that stability. But then she's 93. Like,
Yeah. Well,
I
and
mean,
Prince Charles was tested
yeah,
positive. So, I mean,
yeah,
we haven't, I mean, this is such a ghoulish topic, but I
yeah,
mean, there hasn't been, there's been high profile, and I say celebrity, I don't mean Hollywood celebrity,
right,
but in terms of a well-known international public figure, we have had some diagnosed, and I just said I didn't mean Hollywood, but there's Tom
yeah,
Hanks
yeah,
and Prince Charles, but we haven't had, and I hesitate to even say this out loud, but we haven't had the high profile COVID death.
yes,
And sadly, I feel it's inevitable. And sadly, also, I think you're right. I think it will sort of, especially in places where it hasn't really taken hold too badly. And I realize that's a relative term, but if
yeah,
you compare Canada to, Italy and the United States, it hasn't taken hold too badly here. And for some people, I think it does still feel very surreal. Um, I ran into somebody walking to get groceries last week who I know who lives near me and has a store who is just he's not questioning the authorities. That wasn't it at all. He's just saying he has a hard time believing it's real. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean? And not
yeah,
in a not in a conspiracy sense, but it all feels
yeah,
so surreal. And
yeah,
something like that, I think, for people like that, will make it seem more immediate
yeah,
if this is coming out right. I'm terrified of making him sound like he's a tinfoil hat guy. He's not. He just
yeah,
lives alone. It all feels so odd more than anything
yeah.
else.
Yeah. Well, I think about how the US changed when New York was hit,
Yeah,
the media capital of the world. And you're suddenly watching Savannah Guthrie from the Today Show. She didn't have it, but she's sequestered at home with
yeah.
cold symptoms. And you watch Chris Cuomo come down with it, who, we've all been enjoying his sparring with his brother, right? Like that's part of the fun, right? Like it's completely unethical journalistically to be interviewing your brother, the governor, but what the hell, we're gonna allow it because Andrew should call mom more, right? Like, so it's that kind of stuff, right? Like that focused the states in a way that I don't think anywhere else has really come around. The other thing I think about BC's future is that, well, first of all, the surreal thing is bang on. It is surreal. Like, your friend is right. Like, this is weird. It's weird that my kids are in the other room at a dining room table doing homework assignments which are really just make work assignments because
Yeah.
they've already been graduated by the Minister of Education to the next grade. So I'm like, guys, you realize you're
Thought of that.
like I'm kind of thinking about this out loud. I'm like, you realize you're not getting graded for this? And oh man, that was the dirtiest look my wife has shot me in the whole this whole quarantine. So what are you doing? Don't ruin the facade. And like the kids, what?
This hour of distraction.
I mean, we'll grade you if you want, but come on. But like, it is absolutely surreal. And we talked, we're still talking to business owners at ICBA constantly. How are you managing? Construction seems to have found its footing now. We're starting to see people who had sequestered themselves. Okay, one of the things in construction every year, there's this massive construction expo every year in Las Vegas in March, and it is attended by tens of thousands of people from around the world, especially North America. And you go, and it's really a booze fest, and and the latest in construction gear. But it's a way to reward your best staff. And I bet you there was a few hundred Canadian workers who went down there. Well, of course, they all get back just as the restrictions are hitting, so they all have to self-sequester for 2 weeks. Well, now it's been 3 weeks. We're starting to see them all come out of hiding, and no one Canadian actually caught it from there, at least in BC that we've seen.
That's good.
So, even though there have been Americans who did, but now they're kind of slowly returning to work, and other people are like making the decision. Well, no, my wife is pregnant. I need to stay home, and but by and large, we think construction has, it's certainly following the Dr. Henry rules to the best of their ability, and often transcending them, going even further. It's starting to stabilize a bit. And, it's probably 20-25% down, but compare it to our friends in oil and gas, compare it to the retail industry. Restaurants are the ones that, I think of how many people rely on tips and whatnot to live. Like, it is, construction's in decent shape. So how we pull ourselves up off the mat, how we deal with rolling spikes of this in the year or so to come until someone comes up with a vaccine and becomes the greatest hero in human history. Like, that man or woman will be paraded on their shoulders for centuries. That will be the question now going forward.
Yeah, no, you're right. And we published a piece this morning by Rosalind Coonan, who's an economist, and she was talking about what she believes the recovery will look like. And I really like this analogy because it's so obvious, and I wish I'd thought of it. But she was saying that the best recession, if that makes sense, it looks like a V. It's a steep decline and a steep climb up. She thinks that this will look more like a U with a sort of a long sort of, exactly, and then back up. Now that is sort of the mid-range. The worst thing is, if you think about it, an L.
Yeah. That's not great.
There are those who think it will look like an L. She's not one of them. Jim Pattison, only because we had an interview with him, and several others. But I think it isn't too early to start thinking about, if we stay on course, if current trends hold true and everyone continues to act like grown-ups and follow the best advice. These are big ifs, admittedly. What the next stages will look like for the economy, because I think everyone admits and understands that this can't last forever. It simply can't. Eventually, everything falls apart, and
it might look like a staircase to recovery. We bring back, construction goes full force on infrastructure spending, and then you bring back the supply chain for that, and then you bring back the need for workers, and then you bring back tourism. Maybe like the ones that I would be most concerned about are tourism, restaurants, film, and sports. Because a lot of that is discretionary income, number one. And number two, they just rely, who on earth is going to feel comfortable entertaining tourists for a long time to come?
Well, I talked about this with Ken Peacock from the Business Council of BC last week, and that's one of the things we talked about is how do you, because they were trying to model what the recovery might look like eventually, how do you model the reluctance, sort of a societal, okay, you get the all clear to go to restaurants and bars and Canucks games. Exactly. What if you get the all clear a month from now? Are you going to go to the first game? Exactly. How do you model for that? And so what he suggests is it'll be something like, much like you describe, the sort of the staircase model. It'll be sort of, even if it's not official, but he thinks it will be official for things like restaurants, where you can start with 25% or a third of your capacity is now your capacity legally. And then if things hold steady for a few months, you can go up to 50% and then up to 75%. It's going to be a bit of a bureaucratic nightmare, and it'd probably be if we're being honest, much just the honor system. But I think whether it's legislated or not, that's what it's going to look like.
I think you're right. And you're right. Like, I mean, you're a big Stampeders fan, and other than that, you're a fine human. But like, you taking your son, me taking my son, I can't imagine how long it'll be before I feel comfortable taking them to a sports game, right? Like a Lions game, like, But if it started in June, back half of the season, maybe we just missed this year, right? Like, maybe we just listen to Chris Cuthbert at home. And
it gets tough because eventually, I mean, you mentioned the CFL, but
gate-driven league.
Well, exactly. That was the point I'm going to make. Is like a lot of us are going to be saying, "Well, I'll watch it on TV, or I'll You restaurants. I'll get like, maybe delivery every other week instead of going once a week like I used to. That sounds great for you, but for the business, it may not be sustainable. It may be they have to fold tent. I mean, the Lions, they lose money as is.
Yeah.
If standard attendance for next season is in the sub 10,000 range, the league's not going to last. I'm not suggesting it's your civic duty to go to football games. What I am saying is that these businesses have to make it up the staircase to continue that analogy. And I'm wondering how much of it, how willing people are going to be the first kid to hand in their test, so to speak.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And look, the wage subsidy is not going to help the BC Lions when minimum salary is over and above what they can get back for 75%. You're talking about basically playing games at Swangard Stadium, rather than BC Place. It's not great. But yeah, you're right. A gate-driven league, like the NFL, is a TV powerhouse and a gambling powerhouse, and it'll be fine. Revenues may be down a year.
Yeah, but they can survive a year.
Yeah, totally.
The CFL may not be able to.
CFL may not be.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned playing at Swangard, and maybe someone saying, "Well, oh, good, they should do that, even just for a year." I think if you are going to go to a game, you're probably safer in a bigger space like BC Place.
You're socially distant anyways when you go to
why would you? It's better to have 15,000 people and no one sitting next to someone they don't know.
Everyone has their own row.
Exactly, rather than 8,000 people and they're all sitting like this. I mean, you're going to see a lot of these decisions, and again, so not just football, but in all kinds of businesses.
Just think of what we're missing out on, right? Like there's I think back to, we went and saw Paul McCartney last year because, how many more tourists does Paul McCartney have in him at the time? We thought this is probably it for Vancouver. Well, it's almost definitely it now, right? Like Paul McCartney's not going out on tour again. So you miss out on that. And there's wonderful things about being at home. I think family bonds are redefining. I think the way we live our lives is redefining, as far as like the supper table has become very important again. Like we were laughing, Maclean. I don't think I've ever gone so long without eating a Subway sandwich since our youngest was born, because it's his favorite, and you're in a rush between sports or work and sports, and you grab him a ham and grilled cheese essentially, and you get yourself your turkey bacon and off you go. But like, I haven't had a Subway sandwich in a month. Might be another month. Like kids going through withdrawal. And it's more like when I was a kid and every meal was made at home, like you almost never went out. But that doesn't bode well for restaurants going forward. And
no.
The thing I would look forward to the most is just being able to make that spontaneous stop at the supermarket. Like, I gotta run down to Save On because we're out of sour cream.
Yeah.
And not having to be this huge effort of planning and looking through every cupboard to make sure you have everything you need for the next week. And, that to me will be the...
Well, we had that happen today. My wife needs a new USB cable for a printer. And there's a London Drugs just a couple blocks from here, which is great. She was going to go. She got right up to the door because she does need it. She needs it right away. And got right up to the door and thought,
is it worth it?
Yeah, and she didn't go. We ended up we ordered a whole bunch of other stuff, and London Drugs is still delivering within a reasonable frame. I think it's something like 48 hours or 2 business days. If it was booked out weeks, we wouldn't have got it delivered because you never know. Some disabled person might need their prescriptions.
Sure.
So, yeah, exactly. That's why we're not ordering our groceries. We're going and getting them because we can. But we had that talk where do you need to print it today? Can it wait 2 days? And that is what we chose to do.
Yeah.
Well, I'll go out again on Thursday for groceries once a week, and then that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so weird. That's the weirdest change, right? Like we've become such a store to mouth society. Mm-hmm. You don't have the cupboard space for all this stuff. We're like squirreling food away, weird places, and it's not squirreling. It's just stuff we're gonna need later this week, but. What are you gonna do? Best Buy, by the way, also has an incredibly smart pickup system. You can order it, drive there, they'll have it out for you out front. You tap, and off you go. Never touch anything. Never closer than 6 feet to anyone. It's good.
And I just learned today on Twitter from our friend Tom Hawthorne that my favorite rib place also is doing contactless delivery. So, I may just survive this.
Yeah, someone on Twitter posted a carrot salad recipes. I'm like, this is gonna have to get a hell of a lot worse before I'm ever gonna have a carrot salad. Let me tell you. Blah. All right. Well, any other news? John Horgan disappeared for another week. So
Yeah, he hasn't been. When is the last time we saw him? Was it the province-wide address on Global?
I think he may have done some. Did he introduce Shane Simpson at the Help for Folks Topping Up EI?
He may have. I should know that, to be honest, but I don't specifically recall that. It's very hard, incidentally, if you're wondering if I'm not doing my job. Following these on the phone is really hard because the audio keeps cutting in and out, and it's purely demand. It's nothing they can really do about it. They've never had such intense interest in provincial announcements before, and it's frustrating, to be totally honest. The Dr. Bonnie Henry thing, I've given up trying to call in because I miss significant chunks of it. If you watch, you'll often hear her say, I have to say the last answer again because most of the reporters didn't hear it. That's absolutely true. So it's much easier knowing that I'm probably not going to get a question anyway, because maybe they get to answer 1 out of every 20.
Yeah.
It's better to just turn on the TV. Not all provincial announcements are on live cast on BC One. And so it's been difficult in a way that it wasn't before. I mean, ordinarily the House would be sitting right now and I would know very well whether the Premier was there or not. Right now, I have no idea what he's doing. And I'm not accusing him of anything.
No, for sure.
That's the world we're living in.
Yeah, hopefully he's giving thought to the economic strategy to get out of this. Listen, I still think the province could do more for small business. All of their supports for small business have been tax deferrals.
Yeah,
that's not going to make a huge difference. There's a lot of angst over the wage subsidy for Trudeau. We're still 2 weeks away from knowing the rules on that or seeing applications for that. There's apparently negotiating legislation on that right now among all the parties. They need to get that nailed down because there are people waiting to hear on that. I know that there's also the issue of students, who are supposed to work in the summer, including my daughter. Very curious about what the plan will be around there. There's still definitely more to be done, but I don't know. I feel like in a way announcements have sort of ramped down now for a week, and we're all sort of catching our breath and like, okay, so. Yeah. But we're kind of like the groundhog sticking our head up after winter, like, okay, where are we? What's going on here? What's the sitch? Okay, 6 more weeks. Let's go back under.
Oh man, I hope not. We'll see. And I mean, I think it'll grind to a halt because when we were joking about this at the beginning, it is a long weekend coming up. Yes. A 4-day long weekend. Yeah. Other than Dr. Bonnie Henry, and I don't even know what the schedule will be for her on, Good Friday, Easter Monday. I don't know. You're not going to be seeing anyone else from the provincial government unless something really bad or good happens. Yeah. But yeah, it'll kind of come down to a trickle.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So Easter Sunday, here's our social distancing plan. We have a backyard. It's supposed to be beautiful. So we have a long backyard, like narrow, but long enough. So essentially we have kind of like 3 sections. We're going to set up like little tables in 3 sections. And then we're going to be down here at the far end with our takeout. And then Jenny's sister and her family are coming over with their takeout. And they'll be about 30 feet down away from us. And then right in the middle will be my mother-in-law between the 2 families at her own little table. And that will be our Easter dinner, like we're like on one of those TV shows where the rich guy seats his date at one end of the table and you're way at the other. That will be our socially distanced Easter dinner. The only thing we're like, okay, everyone has to go to the bathroom before they come because you're not allowed in the house.
That's good. I like that.
Yeah, I don't know. We're trying.
We're trying.
Well, for my mother-in-law who lives alone, I mean, this is really hard, right? Like, you got to make sure. So, got to make sure she's getting some sort of interaction and as much as possible.
Absolutely. Well, I don't know how much more there is to cover this week, but I mean, I can talk all day. This is the only time I get to see anyone else all week long. Don't go.
Let's plug Unspun because they were slightly more cheerful this week than they were last week when I was very concerned and almost sent mental health checks out to them.
And we get glimpses of their living rooms.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to Underscore talking about closing Stanley Park to cars, and makes sense to me. It's they need the space for bikes. Then the seawall can be used for pedestrians. That's Seems all right. I don't know. Who knows?
mean,
Who knows
you can
anymore?
you can still drive through it to get to the bridge in that, I assume.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But
Oh.
you won't be able to do the ring road around. But that's fine.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah, that is a problem. You do need to convert your space now, public spaces that aren't being used by cars, to enough space to socially distance. In Langley, we're lucky because we're the horse capital of BC, so a number of our trails are made for horses, specifically two horses going back and forth. There'll be 10 foot wide trails in most of our regional parks. So, you don't feel like you're on top of each other when you're passing by. So
yeah. And if people, there are those who are watching who are saying, no, just stay inside, don't go. Yes, but if you live in a place with a nice yard, that looks very different than someone. And I'm in a condo. We have a balcony. It's small, but it's a balcony. My friend I was mentioning, who I ran into on the way to get groceries, lives in a small apartment in Chinatown. I think he said like less than 400 square feet by himself with no outdoor space. He's going crazy.
Yeah.
And I mean, and you're saying, oh well, we all have to suck it up. Well, people can only suck it up for so long. It's going to be summer soon. He doesn't have air conditioning. I know because he told me. At a certain point, you got to let people go outside if they're doing it safely. But we can't just all stay in indefinitely because that doesn't look the same for everyone.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And maybe that's the final thing to talk about here is like, let's not judge each other. Like this social media mob of people who, I saw two people walking next to each other. Well, you don't know their situation. You don't know if they live together or whatever. You don't know if they're, maybe acquaintances who've said, you're going to be my quarantine and, you and I will see each other once. Like, we don't know. Like, so shut up.
It's not helping anyone.
I actually
the mom at the grocery store who brought her kid. I mean, what was she supposed to do?
Totally. Yeah. Or maybe there's a single young guy. I heard of one young guy there who's buying, 3 or 4 times more than what he would normally need. Well, he's buying for his parents, and, the neighbor across the street. Like, let's just give each other grace in this. I've tried to stay out of the Facebook pieces on this, but I had to weigh in because someone was criticizing a local golf course because there were golfers on it. And I'm like, the golf is allowed to be open. They have rules. They're more than 6 feet apart. They're wearing gloves. Like, they're fine.
Golf seems like the one sport we should almost encourage people to go do.
Precisely.
Right? Like, you're outside. You're by definition far apart from each other, or at least you would be if I'm playing because I'm terrible.
Yes.
But
it's like let's just find a way to give each other grace in this time. And clearly, what we're doing is working. This goes for the Canadian Greens too. Clearly, what we're doing is working. So let's just continue on that path. No one is taking this lightly. No one is being unserious about it. We're all just doing our best to try to make it through. So there you go.
Yeah, that seems like a very good note to end on.
Happy Easter, everyone. That's it.
Until next week.